I'm John Bechtol, Gordon Chang of Forbes.com, my colleague and co-host. North Korea. Over these last days, a strange sight. CNN in North Korea, also the Washington Post correspondent, Anna Fifield in North Korea. So this publicity campaign, if that's what it is, Bruce Bechtol joins us now. Bruce is the author of The Last Days of Kim Jong-il and a North Korea watcher for a long time. But this looks like a very twisted path. Bruce, a very good evening to you. Kenneth Bai, Matthew Todd Miller, and Jeffrey Edward Fowl are prisoners in a prison state, North Korea, a rogue, failed state. Why suddenly television? How did this advance Kim Jong-un? Good evening to you.
Good evening to you, sir. And, you know, I think one of the reasons why they've used television may be that, you know, Kim Jong-un comes from a more modern background than that of his father. Certainly he had more access to multimedia, et cetera, when he was growing up in Switzerland. But, you know, this also shows that the North Koreans continue to be ultra-paranoid against foreigners in their country. I mean, for goodness sake, one guy is being held just because he had a Bible in his hotel room. So, you know, all I could say is, you know, for tourists who are planning on going over there, and there is a few, I would just be very careful, because you never know what will set the very unpredictable North Korean security services or their leadership off.
You're absolutely right, Bruce. We had a Korean War veteran who was trying to contact some of the people that he worked with. He was imprisoned, and of course we have these three, one for leaving a Bible in his hotel room, the other for trying to defect to North Korea. That was Matthew Todd Miller. And then Kenneth Bay, a tour operator who was also a missionary. You know, if things that people here would think to be innocuous are major crimes in North Korea. And now we got these three people. We have an unprecedented series of interviews. It seems that something must be up between Pyongyang and Washington. And this is absolutely fascinating with the way the regime is now dealing with the rest of the world.
Yes, I think it's fascinating, Gordon. I mean, as you know, the North Koreans have tried to use incidents like this to kick off talks in the past. We saw that happen with Bill Clinton when he went over and got those two young ladies out of there. So I think the North Koreans, in addition to trying to gain attention for this, may be trying to figure out a way to get back to talks with us. The reason not being because they want peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula, but of course because they're looking to gain more concessions from the United States and other regional players there.
And this is occurring at the same time that relations between the Chinese and the North Koreans seems to be in trouble. Clearly, you have a North Korea that is reaching out to other powers because they see the Chinese to be unreliable. So, for instance, Pyongyang has now had outreach to not only Moscow, but also Tokyo. And with these series of interviews on CNN, they're reaching out to the United States. So this is unprecedented behavior, and it's going to be, I think, perhaps a turning point. Maybe not a good turning point, but a turning point nonetheless for the North Korean regime. Because I don't know which way they're going to jump, but they're going to do something.
Well, I agree with you, as always, Gordon. We're usually of one mind on many of these issues. I'm just, as I'm sure you are, completely fascinated with the break that has existed between China and North Korea over the past few months. I mean, the Chinese have pulled back on the fuel they provided to such an extent that we've even seen reports of cutbacks in tactical training for armored and mechanized units in North Korea. That's almost unprecedented for the past 15 years. And we've seen, you know, the North Koreans actually move some armored units up into provinces that border China. And, you know, this is not something, frankly, I would have predicted, because I would have thought they'd have kissed and made up months ago, and we just haven't seen it happen.
Does this mean that the Chinese explanation, decades right now, that they can't do anything about North Korea because they fear a collapse, does this mean that that excuse has been retired, Bruce?
Well, I think it may. You know, the Chinese, obviously, as you and Gordon well know, are more tied into the North Koreans than anybody else on Earth. And they may be seeing something within regime stability that the rest of us are not seeing. And I don't know if that means they're throwing in the towel and just allowing this regime to putter along until it no longer is able to survive. But, you know, certainly I've been very surprised by this break that has occurred between China and North Korea, and it's really been in existence since about October of 2013, when we saw Chang, the quote-unquote number 2 guy in the government, be purged and then executed by Kim Jong-un's government.
You know, Bruce, you were the first Korea expert to look at Kim Jong-un and realize how unstable the regime is at a time when everybody else was saying that he had quickly consolidated control. Now what we are seeing are really very strange moves on the part of Pyongyang, and it would seem to me that this would be a validation of your earlier points that things are not right inside the regime itself because it's doing things that we haven't seen before. If you could just walk us through a little bit of that.
Well, we for one thing, we've seen a lot of purges that have occurred, way more purges than occurred under his father. His father, as you know, came to power in 1994. And the difference between the purges that occurred in his father's regime, the first 3 or 4 years of that regime, and these purges, as you know, were very public. And that was something that was quite shocking to me. We've also seen a failure to consolidate power within the military, which is one of the top 3 institutions in the country next to the security services and the party. And that's very disturbing. If you don't control the guys with guns, you're not really totally in control. And furthermore, we've seen reports that the most powerful entity within the party, the Organization and Guidance Department, does not have confidence in Kim Jong-un, and that they have not agreed to give up much of the power that they didn't have under his father, Kim Jong-il. So at the very least, one thing that is very clear right now to folks like you and me is Kim Jong-un has not fully consolidated his power yet. There is no one guy that's fully in control of anything in North Korea, and that is unprecedented. It has never been that way until now. It wasn't that way under Kim Jong-il, and it was not that way under Kim Il-sung.
Bruce, a technical question. We have less than a minute. Who's in charge of the nukes? Is there one bureau, one commander, or is it a shared responsibility?
Well, there's 2 different aspects of the nuclear program. There's the actual weaponized nukes, the nuclear weapons, that is to say the bombs and probably warheads for missiles. And then there's the research side. They actually have an institute, but it's much bigger than an institute, that takes care of that. And previously, both sides of the nuclear aspect of their weaponization answered directly to Kim Jong-il. One would believe that those 2 institutes answer directly to Kim Jong-un now, but it's unclear. I haven't seen any reports at all since he took over about how he's handling the nuclear program, other than the fact that, as you know, they did another test last year that was about 3 times as big as any test they'd done before.
Bruce Bechtol, the author most recently of North Korea and Regional Security in the Kim Jong-un Era. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. I'm John Batchelor.